Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, is this the most complete offense coming to town this weekend the Red Raiders have seen so far? We explore next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Great to be back with you, Chris, as we are now taking a closer look at the next potential victim as the Red Raiders looking to start out 2-0 in Big 12 play. Cincinnati coming to town, and they are looking to do the same. Going to take a listen to a few thoughts from their head coach, Scott Satterfield, on today's program. We'll get into what they're doing on both sides of the ball, a little bit about what he's doing defensively, what they've been able to do, particularly in the takeaway game, especially over the last couple of weeks coming into this one. And, of course, we'll spend some time considering what they are doing offensively, because I got a question for you about whether or not this could possibly be the most complete or versatile offense that we have seen so far this season. But first, let's take a listen to Scott Satterfield talking about their first trip as Big 12 foes to the LBK.
It's a Big 12 game. And it's a Big 12 game on the road. So whatever we've done the last few weeks to get ready to play, it should intensify a little bit more this week. And it really just the focus and take one day at a time. Like you got to be our best on Tuesday, man. It's got to be our best Tuesday practice, getting ready for these guys. And our guys have done a great job with this, is staying in the moment, staying in the day. Not looking behind or ahead. Just staying focused right in there. And I think that is the key. I know it's very simple to say that, but that is the key to have a best Tuesday practice we can have and stay in the moment. But it's a Big 12 game on the road. Everything's going to be more intense this week for sure.
I guess I'm glad they had the outcome they did last time around, smacking Houston. Hopefully they're feeling really, really good about themselves as we prepare for the Tubber Bowl. And asking everyone that's showing up to the stadium to please enter the parking lot with both doors open so that you look like Tommy Tuberville staring straight at you. Those ears just looking like a car driving down the road with both doors open. So asking everybody to participate in that this weekend. But, Chris, we got a Cincinnati team who, I think they were 1-8 in league play a season ago. But the conversation around them early this season does not feel like, that type of team coming to town. Almost all of league play still left to be played, so we'll see how they wound up. But got a little momentum, I guess, as they come into the weekend.
Yeah, and Coach Satterfield, he was asked about, because he's done some different things with some of the regional games that they've had in the non-conference. And it's like, okay, well, now that Texas Tech is here and conference is here and all that, like, okay, you heard the way he answered it. It's like, well, it's a conference road game, the end. Like, we shouldn't need any. I do think that both teams are going to fight this kind of unfamiliarity a bit, just because there's not a lot for as much connection as you've had with ACU and North Texas, some with Arizona State, with the Conyers deal, the Washington State stuff, certainly. There's just not anything really here. That bridges any kind of, these programs have played but the one time in program history. I fully admit myself, it's probably the program I know the least about of anybody in the Big 12 as far as walking around knowledge and all those things. There's certainly not any hatred. They haven't played hardly outside of their city. And yet it's certainly not outside their state. And I do think that the road environment will be, while they may say that it won't, and they're going to use crowd noise and all those things, I do think that the road environment Saturday night should, I don't want to say shock their system, but it should rattle the cage a bit and kind of get them, they'll have to deal with some of that and some of the adversity that comes with that. Just like the Red Raiders will the week after in Tucson, Arizona. It's just part of it, typically. But this is you mentioned the 1-8 last year. They have 2 Big 12 wins total, and they're both over University of Houston. One at each, one in Houston, one in Cincinnati. And I think our guy Donovan Smith has 6 combined interceptions in those 2 games. I think I'm right there. And he may have theoretically lost his job in Cincinnati last Saturday and got pulled and did not return. And I think that they're going to go with the backup there at U of H, but that's Houston's problem. But there's not been a lot of success here yet. And after Luke Fickell left, I think some of that roster splintered a bit, but there's not a lot of people that have been happy with Coach Satterfield initially. Cincinnati is one of those programs. There's a reason why they were added to the Big 12. They're like a Boise. They're like a Houston. They're like I'm trying to think of some of these other like group of 5 teams that just always win. They always are competitive. Down years are 7 or 8 wins. And so I don't think anybody was okay with like, hey, we get it. When Coach Fickell leaves, we're going to take a step back. But 3-9 step back? No, we're not doing that.
Well, I mean, you got to understand coming to a bigger league, surely. And I'm asking a college football fan to understand something, which is insane, I know.
And you're right there.
I mean, they've got a fairly the new millennium has been pretty good to them. Going back to Brian Kelly, Butch Jones, you get into some of and you're double-digit winners, but it's a totally different league. But I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to ask you, was it this most recent run? Is that the reason they're in the Big 12 conference? This most recent little run they've been on, is that why they're here to begin with?
I think it's their location. It's the market. It's also it bridges a gap. It gives West Virginia a travel partner. I think there was a willingness to want to be a part of it. And then it's, bottom line, they were in the college football playoff 3 years ago, whatever it was. And so I don't want to say that it's because there's some, if I can say that right, sustained success that has happened. I mean, this is a program that just, and I think they're in a larger market than a lot of the programs you're looking at that you were considering.
Yeah.
So I think they check some boxes there, and a lot of boxes you wanted to be checked. Football success, market, and then I think it location wise it made some sense. Now, not that the location has not made sense in a lot of these things. You're like, we'll figure it out, But I think you make a great point. I always thought too. I think I'm glad you brought up about the league. This is different than what they've dealt with.
Oh yeah,
week in and week out. It's going to be different, and the West Virginia fan almost just doesn't grasp it.
You took the words out of my mouth, man. From Big East to Big 12.
It's not the Big East, people, and like some of them are like, just don't want to like. We were wrecking shop. What is going on? Fire everybody. This is ridiculous. Exactly. I mean, this ain't Rich Rodriguez coaching the Mountaineers anymore, folks. And I think that the Cincinnati fan kind of probably got just like UCF did. It's like a shock to the system and a slap in the face. Like, whoa, okay, this is a bit different deal than what we were doing. Yes, it is. And I even think that that what you're hearing from some of the new schools. I even thought that Arizona State and their folks said that, and Kenny Dillingham even said that the home environments that you're in and week out, like the road games, what I mean, it's different than even what the Pac-12 is or was in a week in and week out basis.
Yeah.
They're not used to playing in front of college environment and 65 or 60, plus that are loud and energetic and all that stuff. But yeah, sorry to drag on, but that's, I think you made a great point.
Not a single double-digit win season in the history of Cincinnati football, which goes back to the 1950s, prior to 2007. Since then, they have had 8. So that's why I say this new millennium has been fairly kind to them. But I don't, even as deluded as I know that I've been as a college football fan at various points or a college sports fan, how could you not consider the difference in leagues? And the West Virginia example is a great one. Knew that was going to be the case. And I think they've competed fine in the Big 12. Like, I don't think they necessarily have to hang their heads or anything like that. But I guess it was a shock to the system as compared to the life they were living in the Big East Conference. And certainly will be the same from American Athletic Conference. And I think to a degree, even post-Texas and Oklahoma, will be somewhat similar to what you're describing there as far as the Pac-12 to Big 12 transition. I actually want to circle back to that environment conversation maybe on tomorrow's episode as we wrap up the week. I thought that was really interesting sound from Kenny Dillingham, and I would love to put some questions to you regarding the current state of affairs at Jones Stadium as we get back to it for a night game coming up on Saturday. So I want to get back to that with you before we are out of here this week. But as for now, let's take another listen to Scott Satterfield, because I'm really curious to see what we've got going on offensively from the Bearcats and sort of the transition, especially at quarterback from Sam Leavitt to Brendan Sorsby. So let's first take a listen to Coach Satterfield talking about his QB. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Say you're watching a game, you get hit with a hunch, an instinctual calling. Well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're going to place your bets to keep up with everything going down in real time as you submit that slip. And right now, FanDuel is going to get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with only a $5 bet out the gate at FanDuel.com. So let's first take a listen to Coach Satterfield talking about his QB.
We would love to have guys that are mobile to be able to get in and out of, the presence of a pocket if they need to. Also to be able to run the football if they need to, but also be able to decipher defenses, make it accurate throws, and make the big plays when you need them, like the third down plays. And he's done a great job with third down. Has he played perfect? No, but that's going to be hard to play perfect. I think he's played very, very well, and we're going to need great play out of the quarterback as we continue to move forward this week. We know, but yeah, he's had a great 4 games so far. We just got to keep this thing going.
And I'd like to engage in a little bit of reverse psychology here, if I must, and just talk about how Brendan Sorsby is going to throw it all over the yard. Our backs are going to be against the wall, pass defense-wise. He's going to be up and down the field. And I'm doing it because we spent so much time last week talking about Sam Leavitt, ASU quarterback, as a ball carrier. We're talking spies. I don't know how much time we spent on that. And then did we even get a whisper of it in the ball game? I thought that was almost a non-factor. So let's go ahead and talk Sorsby up quite a bit again as far as the passer that he is. And maybe we'll have the same experience. But I do view him as maybe a guy that's expected to, in all honesty, a little bit more accurate, maybe a little bit more arm strength. I don't know. How do you view what we're seeing this week at quarterback compared to what we saw last time around against Arizona State?
And what's weird is this is also Sorsby's also a Metroplex kid. It's wild how many state of Texas quarterbacks.
Yeah.
In far out, like John Mateer, he's at Washington State, and he's freaking like Little Elm, Texas. But Sorsby grew up, I think Lake Dallas is the high school. So he's a Metroplex kid. What is different between he and Leavitt? They're both, I think, fairly young in their careers. This Sorsby started 11 games. He's played in 15 total. But he's 6'3", 230. He's a big kid, and he has not thrown an interception yet. I feel like we should mention that a bunch.
Let's do it. Let's
reverse,
drive that
reverse jinx. Yeah. 8 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. It's similar to Leavitt in that there was not a turnover problem there at all. That's one thing that Arizona State, just as an offense in general, they had taken care of the ball pretty well. And it's not that you turned over Arizona State a bunch. You forced the 1 pick early on in the game, but then you turn them over on downs and everything like that. But I just think your defense plays so much better, or it has played so much better at home, minus the Abilene Christian game. And I think, there's got to be some things that you can do with Sorsby. But, he's completing 65% of his passes. He's got 8 TDs, 0 picks. I think he's a big kid. I think he's a competitor. And there's, he's good enough to beat you. Okay. And just like Leavitt was. Now you have to pick your poison. Do I want to put the game in Corey Kiner's hands, or would I rather put it in Sorsby's hands. I'd rather put it in Sorsby's hands because if Kiner is running wild all over me, that just spells doom because that just takes your soul.
Yep.
When somebody can run and gash you and you just can't stop a running game, it takes your soul. When I can make a team one-dimensional and turn my pass rushers loose and all those things because they can't run it, I like my chances with a somewhat inexperienced quarterback and one that doesn't have just this all-world pedigree. I mean, this is a good player. He's a Power 5 player out of high school that people thought, but then I think I want to go do something else. And he transferred to because obviously the Indiana staff that whole thing changed, and there's a new coach in Indiana now, and so he goes and he's playing at Cincinnati now. So Lake Dallas to Cincinnati via Indiana, I guess is how that would be the correct way to term that. But this is a good player. I mean, and I don't think he's looking to tuck it and go like Leavitt was. He's going to be more, but I think when he turns it loose and runs it, he'll try to get those extra yards, and he's not going to go down. I mean, 6'3", 230. This is linebacker size, but he's not. I think he's a smart kid, and he's had a few accuracy issues, but he's not turned it over yet. So you got your hands full here.
Were you a little surprised that that Leavitt wasn't or didn't make a bigger impact on the ground last week compared to what we talked about? I think even sack adjusted yardage, it was like 8 for 36 or something, which would have been a fine average if you kept rolling throughout the day. But if you'd have told me that going into the game, I'd say I think Tech did a pretty good job defensively.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly the reasons for that. I think the way the game went factored in. I think the way, because there was only really one time when I saw this weird personnel package come in, and it was like 3 what I would term defensive tackles, 3 interior defensive linemen, and Dingle runs out there, and he spied him, and it was on the north end of the field with Arizona State going from north toward that south end, and he tried to run loose, and Dingle, I think it was a sack or a no gain or whatever, and I was like, well, that was a perfectly executed personnel package and call, and maybe they just didn't feel like they could do that with Tech's defense. I don't know. That's why coaches, it doesn't always work. We've seen it work against you a lot, but this is typically why defensive coordinators go with an odd front, or why that's so in vogue now, because it gives you one extra player typically that's faster, whether it be an outside linebacker or a DB, and it gets you more athleticism and speed on the field than a big slow guy or slower guy up front. And running quarterbacks and quick game and all that stuff, that's why the 3-man front and an extra on the back end typically has become so in vogue to try to counter a lot of that. But obviously it didn't work as well versus John Mateer. I mean, that's worth mentioning too.
And we'll circle back to that actually when we take a listen to Scott Satterfield talking about what they're trying to do defensively. We'll get to some of that odd man stuff here in just a moment. I was just curious, we haven't seen it in person just yet, and we're only kind of looking at what they've done so far, on tape or statistically, but because of what their running back can do, and he did a year ago, and some of what their passing games have been able to do so far this season, do you think it's fair to say that this may be the most complete offense or varied kind of offense that Tech has seen so far this year? First, today's episode brought to you by PrizePicks. Testing your skills on PrizePicks this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports and the best way to spice up any game, anytime. You think you got what it takes to win up to 100 times your money? All you got to do is select 2 to 6 players, pick more or less on their projected stats, place your entry, and boom, you're ready to roll. PrizePicks is not only the best way to get action on sports in most states, including Texas, but PrizePicks also puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When the picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. With easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and a giant selection of players, projections, and stat categories, it's no surprise that PrizePicks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So get in on the fun and the winning. and download the PrizePicks app today and use our code LOCKEDONCollege, and you're going to get $50 instantly when you play only $5. Again, that's our code LOCKEDONCollege on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you just play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. With PrizePicks, run your game. Do you think it's fair to say that this may be the most complete offense or varied kind of offense that Tech has seen so far this year, even if it's a thin margin? What do you think?
I think I'm going to go back to the John Mateer reference in a second because I want to set up because I think they have maybe been the best that you have seen to this point, although they didn't necessarily have the O-line on paper that Cincinnati does. But I think Mateer, as we're seeing, is having a freakishly good year. I mean, if you paid attention to what he did last Friday night, it was really late. And I didn't see the end of this game either. But they beat San Jose State in overtime. And I think he threw for 350. He ran for 120 or something. And I think they played Boise here pretty quick. And if they get past Boise, but Mateer has just been crazy. But this offense, so I don't know if I can say that Sorsby or Leavitt were like Mateer. Mateer was good and has been really good, and really every time we've seen him. But what needs to be brought up about Cincinnati is this is the best offensive line you will have seen to this point. I think they are older, experienced. What we've seen of them this year. I think they have maybe their weakest position is maybe receiver, although that's not necessarily fair because Xavier Henderson he had 800 yards receiving last year. This is a Florida transfer. He's from the state of Florida. He's already got 300 and plus yards and 3 touchdowns this year. Their running back is one that didn't get talked about a ton in the summer. He's a 1,000-yard rusher. He's got 400 yards already. He's over 6 yards a carry. This is going to be a problem, Corey Kiner. He's a bit different than Scattaboo. But what is the reason why I'm going to answer this may be one of the toughest things you've seen is their tight end. Joe Royer, number 11, Joey talked about it. Tim DeRuyter talked about it. This is somebody that the NFL folks are saying this is a day 2 or an early day 3 draft pick. He's 6'5", 260. He's got 200 yards and 3 touchdowns or a couple touchdowns. I don't think he's this all-world blocker, but I think that they have their version of Jalen Conyers, I guess is my point. And
gotcha. So
when you put all those different pieces together, if Sorsby plays a good game, he's definitely got some juice going with behind him, next to him, all that stuff. And so, yeah, this is going to be an interesting – and the Vegas folks, what did Arizona State? What did it kick off? Like you were a 4-point favorite?
Yeah, I think 4.5, something like that.
Vegas thinks you're right around 3.5, which I thought your home field or what you had done the last couple of weeks would get a little more toward the number. But, that's not really a heavy favorite at all. This is Cincinnati, folks, and this is a 3-win Cincinnati team. But that was last year. And they've already equaled their win total, through 4 games already. So, and they played one bad quarter against Pitt, which is the fourth quarter. They gave up 15 unanswered. They were up 21 in that, or they gave up 21 unanswered. I guess it was. They had a big lead, and Pitt beat them. And that's really the only. But this is the first time that they're out of their city and state and all those things. And so we'll see kind of what we get. But you're not a big favorite here. But I'm trying to explain why that may be with some of these pieces and some of this unit that you may see with the offensive line unit.
Yeah, seeing on FanDuel today around 2.5. I thought it was 6.5 or so when we kicked off the week. There's been a little bit of movement, but yeah, around 2.5. So trending towards opening as less of a favorite over Cincinnati than you were.
Maybe that injury report with Josh Kelly's got everybody scared.
Possibly.
I will say this. Last week it was like 2.5 or 3, and then it kicked off at 4.5. I will predict something similar. I think as we get closer to the end of the week and closer to kickoff, I think that number it balloons up a bit, and so to tilt more, to give more toward Cincinnati in the point column. So
Okay.
I've talked myself into home field. I just think it's a real thing under Joey. I think they've played really well here, and I just think under the lights, it's been pretty good. Although I get the Kansas State game last year and the Baylor the game the year before, but you had a QB injury in the Kansas State game, and just the Baylor game, I just think they were a lot better than you. Cincinnati is not.
Well, the home field is in better shape than it has
too.
been at any time since Mike Leach. I mean, there's no other way around that. You have restored some competitive success on your home field. So that was one of the things, maybe the first thing we wanted to see checked off by any new coach, whether it was any of those that followed Leach or now Joey McGuire. And Joey McGuire, I think, has been the one to do that. And I don't know, a host typically getting in college football, I don't know, maybe 6 or something like that in a lot of games as a host. So either way, for those so inclined for entertainment purposes only, as in the entertainment of winning cold hard cash, that's the way those numbers are shaking out. Let's get to one more thing before we get out of here today, Chris, and that is the defensive side of the football for Cincinnati. Going back to some of those things you're mentioning as far as odd fronts and what they like to do. And let's take a listen to, once again, Cincinnati head coach Scott Satterfield talking about that Bearcat D.
Ultimately, it gives you the ability to do a lot of different things, and that's where, if you got 3 down linemen and then essentially 3 linebackers but 5 DBs, there's a lot of things you can do with that. I mean, you can drop everybody, obviously 8 people, which we do. You can bring 6 or 7 people on the blitz and from all different areas. And so I think it gives you a lot of versatility. I think it enables you to get a lot more speed on the field when you think about 5 DBs and then 3 linebackers. So, I mean, I just think there's a lot of stuff you can do with it, more so than maybe a 4 down where you got your 4 down lineman. Now you're one less person or body back in the back end. And then our star, which is that, to me, that hybrid position where, they can be a linebacker, we can pull them down the box, or they can be that extra safety that you have in the back end. So to me, that's the advantage of this defense.
If a defense has a shutout on the resume, especially in this day and age of football when they're trying to outlaw defense, that's getting my attention. 7 takeaways so far this year, and I think 5 of those 7 just in the last 2 weeks, also getting my attention. So curious to see what type of challenge Coach Kitley and company have on their hands this weekend.
I think that was the first and really the only, maybe to that point, I don't know if somebody maybe did it later in the day, but I don't think any other Power 4 team, or I think would be right to have the way to say it, had been shut out yet this year. I think I'm right in saying that. So that was like a unique, it's just hard to shut people out, man. The way the rules are, offenses are so good and all those things, but it's what happens when you go on the road and turn it over. Right. But their defensive coordinator is a guy named Coach Veit. I think it's like Veidt or whatever, but you pronounce it Vite, like kite with a V. This was John Heacock's right-hand man at Iowa State. And I think he had turned down group of 5 jobs and things like that. He just wasn't going to leave for anything. But he's now got the opportunity to go run his defense, this Iowa State scheme, which I feel like everybody copies stuff, and that's what we see. But it's a credit to what they've done at Iowa State that you had a semblance of that at North Texas. You're now seeing somebody else doing it at Cincinnati, although this is the close to John Heacock as you're going to get with Coach Veit. So he's, but it's in its infancy in trying to. This will be the first test, the real test or toughest test that you've seen. And I heard Coach Veit talking about it early in the week. Is like, yeah, you see a little bit of everything with Texas Tech, and they are very balanced, and so they make you have to work on everything. And I heard him lamenting about that, which is great. I mean, that's the way you want it. You want them to have to try to prepare for everything because you don't know what you're going to get week to week and what you may heavily favor one week after the next. But yeah, this is what they're trying to install, and it's an odd man front, kind of what we talked about earlier. And there's some holes there. I think that's where the RPO comes into play. Your tight ends come into play. You should be able to run against these guys, although it's going to look like with the naked eye, there's all this space, and then you hand it off, and that's what Iowa State always. It's like bait. Yeah. Like, hey, here's all this green grass. Come on, like we dare you, and then you hand it off, and it's like, whoom. Yeah. That's the tricky thing, but it's built to keep everything from getting beat over the top and to keep everything in front and all those things. But easier said than done sometimes. That's why some of the RPO concepts, if run correctly, can hurt it at times.
Yeah. They've got some of the Big 12's best in the interior. They've got one of the Big 12's best, I think, on the edge as far as getting after a quarterback. So, look, on Locked on Texas Tech, it is eternally RTDB week. That's run the damn ball. And at the risk of redundant, going to say it again, run the damn ball. It would be nice to see Taj Brooks continue to climb closer and closer to Byron Hanspard's all-time record. Actually, just passed, if you did not know, a Locked on Texas Tech favorite, DeAndre Washington, last week for fifth on the all-time list. So that pursuit continues. I think Taj around 788 or something like that away from the all-time mark. But looking forward to this challenge.
Love me some DeAndre Washington, man.
Oh, yeah.
That is one tough hombre right there, man. And he squeezed as much out of what God gave him as any back that's come through here. And his bucket left here empty. I mean, he gave you all he had and then some. Yeah, I loved watching him run.
I mean, to me, in this millennium, it's Torian Henderson, it's DeAndre Washington, and there's some stiff competition right up near him or maybe right behind him. And Taj Brooks is joining that crew, obviously. Yeah. But those are the two guys I really think of as the ones that I enjoyed the most as far as the running back position is concerned.
And I would have been curious had Sir Roderick had what Taj is doing, like a more of a solo, because Sir Roderick's biggest problem was Taj. And that there's – but, I mean, go look at the touchdowns scored list.
Yeah.
Like in school history, Sir Roderick is way up there.
Well, I think he's a top 10 rusher too. He's not near the top, but he is a top 10, I think, all-time rusher for Texas.
But he was never really featured like Taj was because there was always a co-host, if you will. Yeah. So, So anyway,
takes a special man to share the ball with a co-host, doesn't it, Chris? See all these solo shows.
One guy I wanted to mention too, while we're talking about, Shannon Woods has a special place for that era, but
no doubt
Baron Batch was legit. But Eric Stevens never got enough chatter. He had an unfortunate injury, but that cat could get it done. And I'm sure we're forgetting some, but yeah, fun conversation to have.
Yeah, DeMontre Moore can still take a flying leap for all we're concerned here in the 806. All right, appreciate you guys as always for being out there. Chris, appreciate your time as always, man. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Shout out to all the Lonnie Anderson fans that I have heard from since that one episode when we talked about WKRP in Cincinnati.
That's right. Got the people talking.
That's right. It certainly did. Even the text line coming to my phone, it's like, I've seen pictures and texts and all that. So I appreciate all of you kind folk out there. I know, Cowan, you heard from some folks too, but we'll do it again and talk to you tomorrow.
That's right. And if you want to be a part of that text line, one-on-one, straight to the source, then become a Matador Mob insider. Check out the link there in the show notes. And, of course, you can try on a free 14-day trial to see how it suits you. I saw somebody walking around at the South Plains Fair last night that says, Chris Level, text me back on his T-shirt. And I was like, wow, we should have come up with that idea. But I'm telling you, it's the sensation spreading across Red Raider Nation. So go ahead and join the crew. We got a Matador Mob mailbag episode still to come this week. They're already getting their questions in. You want to get a question in, again, hit the link there in the show notes or on the Twitter page at Locked On Tech to give her a try. All right. Appreciate you everydayers as always for being out there. Continue to mix it up in the YouTube comments section. Always love seeing those thoughts. One of the best ways to help us grow the show is to comment anything below. So thanks to those that do that. For Chris, I'm Casey. Thanks for the time. And we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.